This content is brought to you in association with my buddies over at Jam Jam Cards UK. You can find the links to the eBay store and the Facebook page in the description. Hi guys, it's Joe here from Rufioh. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. You should definitely hit subscribe and the notification bell before we go any further and you realise how fucking garbage this content is. But if this is not your first time on the channel, welcome back. For today's video, we are taking a look at the deck that I took to the Canterbury Regional here in the UK. Now, if you're wondering what's going on here, considering I've been playing PK for weeks, and if you are a follower of the channel, you'll have noticed that. You'll also have noticed that I've had an absolutely horrid time with it. For some reason, since Burst of Destiny, I've had nothing but absolute trouble playing Phantom Knights. I can't seem to get any wins. I'm probably getting a little bit inside my own head, and it's not going very well. So, I sat on Tuesday night feeling absolutely shitty and feeling sorry for myself, and realised that I probably shouldn't be playing Phantom Knights anymore. I needed to play something different. If I was going first, which was my weapon of choice, I was losing to decks with just board breakers that I could do nothing about. And to get around that was to cut a lot of the important parts of what makes my deck work well out of the deck. And then I found a lot of the time when I was going second, I just couldn't seem to break boards in the same way. It seemed like a bit of a weird situation where you were almost always better off going second, seeing those board breakers or hoping to see them and trying to play through decks. And then I figured, well, why am I not playing a go second deck? So I thought about Gren Maju a little bit. And I discussed it with Jam, who's obviously part of the sponsors, Jam Jam Cards UK. Speaking of which, if you do want to get any singles on the cheap, use code Rufioh15 on their site for 15% off. There's a link in the description if you want to go ahead and check that out. But anyway, back on track. So I was talking to him and I said to him about Gren Maju, and we sort of left it at that. And then a little bit later in the week, Henman mentioned it and said he was thinking about playing Gren. And I'm like, yo, that's crazy. I was talking about playing Gren as well. So we decided last second on Friday night, the day before the regional, that I was going to play Gren Maju. So we got rid of my PK deck. We played like 5 or 6 test games with Gren just to see how it got on. And we basically just built the list from scratch. Well, I say we, he pretty much did it. And we decided to go ahead and give it a go. So I took it to the regional. I ended on X2-1 in the end, which for me is a personal best. And I know that's probably not, crazy to anyone, especially if you're someone who, regularly tops regionals or whatever. But it is a personal milestone and we're a step closer to breaking into that top. And usually once you've broken that top, you're normally in a good place because you know what to do. It's almost like this mental block that once you get past it, you're good to go. But anyway, I did really well with it. It was like the talk of the tournament. Everyone was crowding around talking about Gren Maju for the day. Loads of people were like sat down just shitting themselves whenever they sat across me because they knew what I was playing. And it was pretty funny. There was also some real big spice in the side deck, which we'll get to in there. Most of the main deck is pretty standard, though. There's a few new inclusions from the kind of decks you would have played before and what have you. But anyway, I'm definitely waffling on too much. Let's get stuck in to the profile. So the main deck, if I remember correctly, is 41 cards. We start off with triple Gren Maju. It's Gren Maju. It's the Gren Maju deck, right? So you need to play 3 copies. Big boy just punches the fuck out of people. Pretty good. We have triple copies of Eater of Millions. Yeah, this card's really good. It deals with really problematic monsters. Really good bit of removal. Just another great way to banish extra cards. Just a really, really good option. 2 copies of Alpha, the Master of Beasts. This was really, really nice, actually. Came up quite a lot. It just forces people to use effects they don't necessarily want to. If they don't, you're going to bounce stuff. You can clear things, you can beat over stuff, or you can make rank 8s out of it, so it's pretty nice. We've got triple copies of Gizmek Orochi. I think you need to just play it in this deck. Card's absolutely insane. It keeps you alive. You can summon it during their end phase, banishing it, especially if you've got like Gren in hand. You've boosted it by 4k attack. Well, not 4k. My maths is crap, but you know what I mean. You boosted it by 8 more banished cards. You're summoning it, and then you're going to pop a card the next turn. Usually it's the monster that they've set in defense because they're worried. Or you're going to clear a problematic one, and then you're going to punch through them with Gren Maju for game. Then on to our danger package, we've got 1 copy of Jackalope. This is actually only in here so that you can search Gren. I know this is going to sound crazy, but we'll get to that in a moment. And if you can't figure it out yet, you'll see when I get there. We've got triple copies of Danger Thunderbird. Yeah, it's just, again, good back row removal. It's another level 8 that you can easily dig into. And, of course, it can help you dig through your deck a little bit easier as well. We've got triple copies of Danger Bigfoot. They did decide that it was hilarious to give me the gold ones, but they didn't give me those nice alternate art ones, so I had to deal with the old one that just looks kind of ugly. Triple copies of Dimension Shifter, probably the MVP of the day, along with one card in the side deck, which again, we'll get to in a minute. Dimension Shifter was absolutely insane. The games where it came up, it was just like it was a free win a lot of the time. It skipped most of my opponent's turns. You know, not much else to say about it, just a really insane card. And that rounds off our monsters. Let's go on to the spells and traps. So I say traps, there's only one in here. So we start off with triple copies of Small World. This was absolutely bonkers. Everyone had to read it when I activated it. Everyone kind of looked at me like, yo, can that do that? So, if you didn't know already, the big spice is the fact that, well, there's a few things you can do in here, but if you have Eater of Millions in deck, or you have Jackalope in deck, you can search your Gren Maju. And if you don't understand why you can do that, I'll get to that in just a second. So, basically, you have to just have any dark in hand that isn't, you know, a copy of the same card, and doesn't have any of the other same stats apart from being dark, which is like all your dangers, your Gizmek, everything. And if either of these in deck, you can search this. You can search this because the only thing they have in common is level 3. But the real spice is the fact that you can do it with Eater of Millions, because the only thing they have in common is Fiend. Now, I know that they both have question mark attacks, and that's going to make you go, bro, 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 bro. You're wrong. You're wrong. Question mark is undefined, therefore, these do not have this in common. They do not have this in common because their attack and defense is undefined. Therefore, the only thing they have in common is Fiend. I clarified the ruling. That is exactly how it's going down at the moment. No one's told me otherwise, and everywhere else I've seen it seems to be ruling that way. So, if you're playing Gren Maju, rejoice with Small World. You can use Eater of Millions or Jackalope to search your Gren Maju, which is absolutely broken. So Small World, obviously good. We already know this, and recently it's got a lot of hype. That's exactly why. Well, not because of Gren Maju, but other reasons. We run triple copies of Allure of Darkness. Yeah, lots of darks in deck, just digging deep. Triple Pot of Desires. Honestly, it's insane. You don't even care if they ash it, because banishing the 10s are like real plus here. We've got 2 copies of Trade In. We just didn't have the third available at the time, but it was absolutely fine as was. Triple copies of Mystic Mine. This won me so many games, it's unreal. Just slapping this down, and the only monster you ever need to summon is Gren. You just sit there and banish a load of stuff. If they out it, you got more copies. At one point, I had one opponent do the really genius thing and bounce it so I could play it again. He didn't realise it was not a hard once per turn for some reason. But it is what it is. Mystic Mine was absolutely insane. Terraforming, because it's the 4th copy of mine. We then played 2 copies of Lightning Storm. Again, just had the 2 available, but 2 was actually plenty in the end. A single copy of Feather Duster, because back row is usually the big issue. Monsters you're switching off for free anyway. A single copy of Call by the Grave. It's a 1, but again, it was broken when it came up. And finally, we round off with a single copy of Red Reboot. Now, it does conclude the main deck. Not all that much have changed in there. In fact, I don't think I've changed much at all. Maybe just add a copy of Trade In, but really, everything else worked really, really well. Definitely happy with how it's gone. Extra deck. Token. Obligatory. 2 copies of Dingirsu. 2 was plenty. I think, honestly, the whole tournament, this was the only card I ever summoned out of the extra deck. And I only summoned it once. So, if I did summon any others, it really wasn't relevant. And that won me the game anyway. We got a single copy of Hope Harbinger. That's just because theoretically you can set it up if you have to go first. We generally don't, but I'll get to that. We do have cards to deal with that. We have lots of cards to just boost materials so that we can get into Zeus if we need to. Big Spider Boys, again, never came up, but in theory they're good. 2 copies of Zeus. You want to be able to make multiple copies if you do get into grind games, and you can find ways to do it. It can often win you games. A single copy of Link Spider, just because I'm playing other spiders. Nightmare Phoenix, just nice utility. IP Masquerena, again, another nice utility card for if you have to go first. Nightmare Unicorn, again, same sort of thing. Blackluster Soldier, again, just a really nice body. It can just help deal with things in battle, out cards, that kind of thing. Zeroboros is like a pseudo Gren, not quite, but it can also deal with banishing stuff off the field, which is kind of nice. And then finally, a single copy of Access Code Talker, just, well, because it's big and it can clear boards. But again, the only one that actually came up was Dingirsu, and it came up once, and that was enough to win me the game. And then we move on to the side deck where there is some actual real goddamn spice. So, just again, another token, nothing important there. So we have 2 copies of Book of Eclipse. Book of Eclipse is Book of Eclipse, really strong at the moment. Mostly for going second playing into boards, but A lot of the time you can actually set this when you go first and it can interrupt your opponent, especially like it can effectively skip a turn against the right decks. But again, more often than not it should go second option, but it's one that you can go with for going first. We have 2 copies of Twin Twisters, yeah, just more back row removal. Cyclone's another good option as well, but this worked really nice. We have 2 copies of Trap Trick, just didn't have the room for a third one, but 2 worked fine anyway. It just becomes an extra copy of any of the traps. We have triple copies of Evenly Matched. It doesn't lose to Infinite, not Infinite Impermanence, Imperial Order. It helps break bigger boards, which is obviously good. If you're forced to go first, you can always set it, and then if your opponent does clear you out, you can just banish all their stuff at the end of the battle phase, which did happen for me. Really nice and strong. Triple copies of Dimensional Barrier. Yeah, this was really nice actually when it came up. I cucked myself with it once against Invoked. I decided to set it inactivated to stop them from summoning more fusions, but they had Winder on board, which meant that they could just special summon as much as they wanted. So yeah, it kind of cut me a little bit because then they could summon their Fleur-de-Lis and got enough on board to kill me. So big misplay, which meant that I got a draw instead of a win that I should really have got, but there you go. But basically the plan was to just play as many traps that could really be activated on the fly. Like, if my opponent tries to blow out all my back row, what can I just chain? What can I chain to destruction? What can I chain to things that are happening, like kind of live scenarios? And these are really good, but the real spice was the final card, and that was Banquet of Millions. So one of the big problems that this deck does have, and granted some of the extra deck options can help you with this, but the real big issue this has is going first. Now, the problem I found, and I found this out on the fly because again we had no real time to test, was that when you play against birds, you pretty much have to go first. Most of the other decks you can choose to go second and break boards, with birds, because they play Oath, which can obviously negate from the grave, and they play such a big presence of Omni stuff, like you'll have to burn through your entire hand to get anywhere, and sometimes that works okay if you're kind of lucky with your hand, but more often than not you can't do anything. The other thing as well is that there's some decks where you know your opponent's going to make you go first and they're just going to side in board breakers and try and plow through you. What this card does, and if you haven't read it, you really should, here you go. So basically you can banish any number of cards from your extra deck face down and banish the same number of random face down cards from your opponent's extra deck. So, but you banish them face up. To clarify, that's basically you can't banish pendulums, but basically you banish 15 in your turn 1. They banish their extra deck. Sorry, your turn 1, their turn 1, which is their turn 2 now because you've gone first, but you get the point. You banish your entire extra deck for the turn. They get it back at the end of the turn. You don't get yours back. But what it does mean is you've now got a ton of banished cards, which is 15, which only really has troubled me once, but I still won that game anyway. But it means that you switch your opponent's turn off. Like, every single person that read this went, oh, wait, I can't use my extra deck this turn. And they basically just skip their turn. And in the following turn, it'll either kill them or put them in a position where they couldn't recover from it. And it was just absolutely insane. So big shout out to Hemon, who was like, we need to play this card and see how it gets on. It was a, like, literally last second edition. This was going to be, I think we had 2 Heavy Storm Dusters and a third Book of Eclipse. We decided to cut those for this literally as it was handed in my list 10 minutes before the tournament. So I was using it on the fly. The first game I completely fluffed it, which was the Invoked one. I didn't use it correctly when I could have done against like Nadir's Servant and things like that. But anyway, the point is that this was absolutely insane. In every game that it came up, other than that, I'm pretty sure it won me the game every time it happened. So it was pretty nice, and definitely if you're playing this, you should absolutely be playing this in here. And of course with Trap Trick, we're running an extra 2 copies anyway. But that, my amigos, concludes today's list. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and found some ideas you might want to try out for yourself, especially if you're a Gren Maju player. Hopefully this has given you some ideas of what you could do. Again, this deck was a ton of fun. It's given me my personal best regional result. Again, I'm not the best player in the world, but this has led me to what I think is a fairly reasonable finish, especially considering I was playing Gren Maju of all things. It was just so little pressure just to go and play and have fun again, and that was really, really nice. So I encourage you, whenever you get stuck in a rut, just play something fun, and sometimes it works out quite nicely. Honestly, like, it's, maybe if one of those losses is a win, you get into top cut. That's how close it is and how fine the margins are, but it felt good to be playing a deck that, give me some enjoyment again. I don't know if I'm going to be playing this going forward. Again, it was just a cool idea for the weekend, so probably not. We do have another regional coming up in Northampton in a couple of weeks' time on our home ground, so I'm not sure if I'll be playing it for that. Probably not. I'll probably play something a bit more competitive just to make sure that, we give ourselves the best chance of topping while it's on home turf, but that's besides the point. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, especially enough the fact that you've made it this far into the video that you'll have hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.